Close your eyes and let your mind drift as we journey through the world of Dragon Ball, focusing on one of its most complex and fascinating characters. From hidden details in the manga to little-known stories from the anime, these gentle facts about Vegeta will guide you into a peaceful sleep. So, settle in, get comfortable, and let the Prince of all Saiyans carry you into dreams. When Akira Toriyama first conceived Vegeta, he was meant to be a temporary villain who would appear for only a brief arc before being written out of the story entirely. The Saiyan saga was intended to conclude with Vegeta's defeat and permanent exit from the series. However, Toriyama's editor at the time noticed something special about the character's design and personality. The combination of Vegeta's pride, his ruthless efficiency, and that distinctive widow's peak hairstyle created such a compelling presence that the editorial team convinced Toriyama to keep him around. This decision would fundamentally reshape the entire trajectory of Dragon Ball, turning what was meant to be a short appearance into one of the most enduring character arcs in manga history. The name Vegeta itself follows Toriyama's playful naming convention for Saiyans, which are all based on vegetables. Vegeta comes directly from the word vegetable, continuing the theme established with characters like Kakarot, which references carrot, and Raditz, derived from radish. The seemingly simple naming scheme was Toriyama's way of organizing the growing cast of characters in his mind, making it easier to remember which species each warrior belonged to. The vegetable theme for Saiyans was chosen specifically because Toriyama wanted their race to feel earthy and primal, connected to growth and natural strength, rather than technology or mysticism. In the original Japanese version, Vegeta's speech pattern is quite distinct from how it appears in English translations. He uses the personal pronoun aura, which conveys a sense of masculine pride and self-importance. This is different from Goku's use of aura, which sounds more rural and unsophisticated. Vegeta also speaks with a level of formality that reflects his royal upbringing, rarely using contractions and maintaining a certain distance in his dialogue, even when speaking to allies. This linguistic characterization was carefully crafted to show that despite losing his kingdom, Vegeta never abandoned his princely bearing or the speech patterns of Saiyan nobility. The design of Vegeta's armor went through several iterations before Toriyama settled on the iconic look. The original Saiyan armor with shoulder pads was inspired by samurai armor, but Toriyama wanted something that felt both protective and intimidating while still allowing for dynamic action poses. The armor's design was also practical from a storytelling perspective because it could be damaged in battle to show the intensity of fights without requiring Vegeta to be mortally wounded. As the series progressed, Vegeta's armor evolved, losing the shoulder pads and becoming more streamlined, which Toriyama explained was meant to represent Vegeta adapting to Earth and becoming less reliant on Saiyan military tradition. One of the most overlooked aspects of Vegeta's character is his relationship with his father, King Vegeta. In the few flashbacks we see, the king is shown as a proud but ultimately powerless ruler who is forced to bow to Frieza. This humiliation deeply affected young Vegeta, who witnessed his father's submission to a tyrant. The psychological impact of seeing the strongest Saiyan he knew reduced to a servant planted seeds of both ambition and resentment in Vegeta's mind. It explains why he became so obsessed with strength and why he refused to ever show weakness or submission to anyone. His entire personality was shaped by the determination to never experience the same humiliation he saw in his father's eyes. Vegeta's first appearance in the manga shows him casually destroying an entire planet with a smile on his face. This introduction was deliberately shocking because Toriyama wanted readers to understand immediately that this villain was on a completely different level than anyone the heroes had faced before. The ease with which Vegeta committed planetary genocide was meant to establish the Saiyans as warriors who viewed destruction as simply part of their job. This made his later redemption arc all the more powerful because readers had seen just how far he had fallen and how much he would need to change. The relationship between Vegeta and Nappa was more complex than it initially appeared. While Vegeta treated Nappa with casual cruelty, killing him without hesitation when he proved useless, there were subtle hints in the manga that suggested a longer history between them. Nappa had likely served the royal family for years, possibly even helping to raise Vegeta after Planet Vegeta's destruction. The cold efficiency with which Vegeta eliminated his last connection to his original culture showed how completely he had embraced the philosophy of survival of the fittest. It also demonstrated that Vegeta's loyalty was never to people, but to the abstract concept of Saiyan pride and power. During the Namek saga, Vegeta's character underwent a fascinating transformation that many fans overlook. He began the arc as a straightforward villain, seeking immortality to defeat Frieza. But as the story progressed, he started developing something resembling a survival partnership with the heroes. The moment when he asks Goku to defeat Frieza and avenge the Saiyan race is particularly poignant because it represents the first time Vegeta acknowledged something larger than his own ambition. He connected his personal vendetta to the genocide of his entire species, showing that beneath his selfish exterior, he carried the weight of being possibly the last pure-blooded Saiyan prince. Vegeta's death at the hands of Frieza was originally meant to be permanent. Toriyama had planned for this to be Vegeta's final moment of redemption, where he would die acknowledging Goku's superiority and passing on his pride to the lower-class warrior. The scene where Vegeta cries, something he had never done before, was written to be his ultimate character moment. However, the Dragon Ball's ability to revive people meant that Toriyama had left himself a narrative opening, and the popularity of the character made it almost inevitable that he would return. This death scene remains one of the most emotionally powerful moments in the entire series, because it was written with genuine finality. The decision to bring Vegeta back to life and keep him on Earth was driven partly by fan response and partly by Toriyama's realization that Goku needed a rival to push him forward. Without Vegeta, Goku had no one who could challenge him on a personal level. Piccolo had become an ally and friend, but Vegeta represented something different. A mirror image of what Goku could have been if he had been raised as a Saiyan warrior instead of on Earth. This dynamic became the emotional core of the Android and Cell sagas, where Vegeta's desperate need to surpass Goku drove many of his decisions. Vegeta's relationship with Bulma was never explicitly shown developing in the manga. Between the Namek saga and the Android saga, there is a 3-year time skip, and when readers next see Vegeta, he is living at Capsule Corporation and Bulma is pregnant with Trunks. Toriyama deliberately left this relationship development off-page because he felt uncomfortable writing romance and preferred to let readers imagine how these two strong-willed personalities came together. In interviews, he has mentioned that he imagined Bulma being attracted to Vegeta's danger and intensity, while Vegeta was drawn to someone who refused to be intimidated by him. The birth of Trunks represented a turning point in Vegeta's character that was more subtle than dramatic. He did not suddenly become a loving father or a gentle person, but the existence of a sun created a connection to Earth that Vegeta could not ignore. For the first time in his life, he had something to protect beyond his own pride. This shift was shown in small ways, like his fury when Cell absorbed Android 18, which was partially motivated by the realization that his arrogance had endangered his son's future. Vegeta's growth as a character was never about grand declarations, but about these small moments where his actions revealed changing priorities. The scene where future Trunks reveals that Vegeta is his father is one of the most important in the series for understanding Vegeta's psychology. His reaction is not joy or pride, but confusion and discomfort. Vegeta had never imagined himself as a father because he had never imagined a future beyond fighting and proving his superiority. The idea that he would settle down, have a family, and apparently die protecting them from the androids was completely foreign to his self-image. This moment forced Vegeta to confront the possibility that he might become something other than a warrior, though he resisted this idea for years. Vegeta's training methods are noticeably different from Goku's, reflecting their different philosophies about strength. While Goku trains to test his limits and enjoy the challenge, Vegeta trains with an almost desperate intensity, driven by the fear of being surpassed. The 300 times gravity training that Vegeta subjected himself to was not just about becoming stronger, but about punishing himself for every perceived failure. His training was as much psychological torture as physical development, a constant reminder that he was not yet the strongest. This difference in motivation is why Vegeta often achieved transformations through anger and desperation, while Goku achieved them through need and acceptance. The Super Saiyan transformation had a completely different meaning for Vegeta than it did for Goku. For Goku, becoming a Super Saiyan was a response to Krillin's death and the need to stop Frieza. For Vegeta, the inability to transform despite being of royal blood was a source of shame and rage. He had been told his entire life that he was elite, that his bloodline made him special, yet a low-class warrior achieved the legendary transformation first. When Vegeta finally transformed during the Android Saga, it was not in battle, but during training, through sheer force of will and anger at himself. This self-achieved transformation was very much in character for someone who refused to rely on emotional triggers or external motivation. Vegeta's obsession with surpassing Goku reached its peak during the Cell Saga, when he allowed Cell to reach his perfect form. This decision is often criticized as one of Vegeta's biggest mistakes, but it reveals something important about his character. Vegeta did not simply want to be stronger than Cell. He wanted to prove that he was the strongest, period. Defeating Cell in his imperfect form would always leave doubt, the possibility that he had only won because Cell was incomplete. By allowing Cell to reach perfection, Vegeta was trying to create an unambiguous victory that would prove his superiority once and for all. The fact that this backfired spectacularly was a harsh lesson about the difference between pride and wisdom. The relationship between Vegeta and his son Trunks is fascinating because it mirrors his own relationship with his father in inverted ways. King Vegeta was present, but ultimately weak in the ways that mattered, unable to protect his kingdom or his people. Vegeta, by contrast, is incredibly powerful, but emotionally absent, unable to express affection or approval. When Cell kills future Trunks, Vegeta's rage is genuine and overwhelming, but even in that moment, he cannot articulate his feelings. His explosion of violence is the only language he has for expressing love, a tragic limitation that stems from being raised as a warrior, where emotions were weaknesses to be eliminated. The 7 years between the Cell Saga and the Majin Buu Saga represent perhaps the most important period in Vegeta's development, even though most of it happens off-screen.
During this time, he lives as a family man, has a second child, and appears to have settled into life on Earth. However, beneath this surface domesticity, Vegeta was quietly going mad with frustration. He had stopped training as intensely, and Goku was dead, which meant he could never prove his superiority. When Goku returned for the tournament, Vegeta's carefully maintained control began to crack. He had convinced himself that he had moved beyond his obsession, but Goku's presence revealed that nothing had actually changed. The Majin Vegeta transformation is one of the most controversial and important moments in the character arc. By allowing Babidi to control him, Vegeta thought he could reclaim the ruthless focus he had when he was a pure villain, before emotional attachments complicated his life. He explicitly tells Goku that he allowed this to happen because he saw Goku getting stronger while he stagnated, and he blamed his family and peaceful life for holding him back. This was Vegeta's attempt to return to who he was before Earth changed him. But the transformation revealed that he could not actually go back. The old Vegeta would never have sacrificed himself to save others, but Majin Vegeta did exactly that when he fought Majin Buu.
Vegeta's sacrifice against Majin Buu represents a crucial turning point because it was the first truly selfless act of his life. He knew he could not win, knew that even his final explosion might not be enough, but he did it anyway because it was the right thing to do. For a character whose entire existence had been defined by self-interest and pride, this moment of genuine heroism was transformative. The fact that it failed, that Buu survived and Vegeta died for nothing in practical terms, made it even more meaningful. It was not a strategic victory, but a moral one, proving that Vegeta had finally learned something beyond the pursuit of power. When Vegeta is revived during the Buu saga, his character has fundamentally shifted. He no longer talks about surpassing Goku as his primary goal. Instead, he focuses on protecting his family and helping to defeat Buu. The moment when he humbles himself to ask the people of Earth to give their energy to Goku's spirit bomb is perhaps the most out-of-character thing he could do. And that is precisely the point. The old Vegeta would never have asked for help or acknowledged anyone as superior, but this new Vegeta understood that some things were more important than pride. His speech to the people of Earth, where he calls Goku the one who can save them all, represents a complete reversal of his lifelong worldview. In Dragon Ball Super, Vegeta's character development continues in subtle but important ways. His relationship with Beerus is particularly interesting because it forces him back into a position he thought he had escaped, being powerless before an overwhelming force. The difference is that this time, instead of responding with rage and recklessness, Vegeta responds with humility and strategy. He swallows his pride to keep Beerus happy because he understands that protecting Earth is more important than his ego. This shows genuine growth, a recognition that pride without wisdom is just foolishness. Vegeta's training with Whis represents a new phase in his development. For the first time, he is training under someone he genuinely respects and learning techniques rather than just pursuing raw power. Whis teaches him that his greatest weakness is his tendency to overthink during battle, to let his emotions and pride cloud his judgment. This is a direct attack on the core of Vegeta's personality, and the fact that he accepts this criticism and works to overcome it shows remarkable maturity. The Vegeta who first arrived on Earth would never have admitted to any weakness, let alone worked systematically to correct it. The Ultra Ego transformation, introduced in the manga, represents Vegeta finding his own path, separate from Goku's. While Goku pursues Ultra Instinct, a technique of selfless defense and fluid response, Vegeta pursues Ultra Ego, a technique of selfish offense and deliberate tanking of damage. This transformation is perfect for Vegeta because it builds on his natural tendencies, his aggression, his pride, and his willingness to endure pain. It suggests that Vegeta has finally accepted that he does not need to follow Goku's path and that his own approach to fighting has value.
This represents the end point of his character arc, not surpassing Goku, but becoming comfortable with being himself. Vegeta's relationship with Goku evolved from pure hatred to something more complex. In the later series, they are not friends in a conventional sense, but they have a deep understanding and respect for each other. Vegeta still wants to surpass Goku, but this desire no longer consumes his entire existence. He has other priorities, other relationships, and other sources of meaning in his life. The rivalry continues, but it has transformed from a destructive obsession into something almost healthy, a motivation for self-improvement rather than self-destruction. Vegeta acknowledges Goku as a rival, a peer, and in some ways as the standard by which he measures himself, but he no longer sees Goku's existence as a threat to his own worth. One often overlooked aspect of Vegeta's character is his intelligence. While Goku is often portrayed as a fighting prodigy with limited intellectual interests, Vegeta is shown to be a tactical thinker who analyzes his opponents and develops strategies. During the Namek saga, he plays Frieza's forces against the heroes, constantly adapting his plans as the situation changes. His ability to understand and predict opponent behavior, combined with his willingness to retreat when outmatched, shows a sophistication that pure warriors like Goku often lack. This intelligence makes Vegeta's mistakes more tragic, because they are usually not failures of understanding, but failures of pride overriding better judgment. Vegeta's role as a father to Trunks and Bulla shows his growth in ways that fighting scenes cannot. With future Trunks, he struggles to express affection or approval, but his actions consistently show that he cares. He trains with Trunks in the Time Chamber, fights alongside him against Cell, and shows fury when Trunks is endangered. With Bulla, his younger daughter, born during the peaceful period before Super, he is noticeably more comfortable showing affection. There is a scene in Super where Vegeta rushes away from a tournament to be present for Bulla's birth, choosing his family over fighting, something the old Vegeta would never have done. This growth is not portrayed as making him soft, but as making him complete. The contrast between Vegeta's relationship with Bulma and Goku's relationship with Chi-Chi reveals different approaches to family life. Goku is often oblivious to his family's needs, disappearing to train or fight with little consideration for how this affects Chi-Chi or his sons. Vegeta, despite his emotional limitations, is shown to be more present in his family's daily life. He lives at Capsule Corporation, he is aware of his family's activities, and while he may not be demonstrative, he is consistently there. This difference suggests that Vegeta, despite being the less naturally warm person, has worked harder to integrate family life into his identity. Vegeta's technical skill as a fighter is sometimes overshadowed by Goku's prodigious instincts, but Vegeta's approach to combat is more methodical and refined. He develops specific techniques like the Final Flash and Gallic Gun that showcase his preference for overwhelming power channeled precisely. His fighting style is more aggressive and direct than Goku's, reflecting his personality. Where Goku adapts and flows, Vegeta overwhelms and dominates. This difference's style has allowed them to complement each other in team battles, with Vegeta's aggression creating openings that Goku's adaptability can exploit.
The Saiyan concept of battle pride is embodied most purely in Vegeta. Unlike Goku, who fights for the joy of challenge and self-improvement, Vegeta fights to prove something, to himself and to others. This difference is crucial because it means that defeat affects them differently. When Goku loses, he accepts it and looks forward to getting stronger. When Vegeta loses, especially to Goku, it feels like a fundamental invalidation of his worth. This psychological difference explains why Vegeta's journey has been so much more painful than Goku's. Every defeat is not just a setback, but a crisis of identity. Vegeta's relationship with Piccolo is one of the more understated dynamics in the series. They are similar in many ways. Both former villains, both proud warriors, both somewhat isolated from the group's more casual friendships. There are moments where they show mutual respect, like when Piccolo acknowledges Vegeta's growth or when Vegeta accepts Piccolo's strategic input. Neither would call the other a friend, but there is an understanding between them that suggests a connection based on shared experience rather than affection. They are allies who recognize each other as serious warriors in a group that sometimes treats fighting too casually. The theme of royalty and its mooning runs throughout Vegeta's character. He introduces himself as a prince, and this title remains important to him even decades after his kingdom's destruction. But what does it mean to be a prince without a kingdom, without subjects, without the infrastructure that gives royalty meaning? For much of the series, Vegeta clings to this title as his last connection to his heritage, but it becomes increasingly hollow. His real nobility, the part that actually matters, emerges not from his blood, but from his choices. When he sacrifices himself for others, when he protects the weak, when he puts aside pride for the greater good, these are the moments when he acts truly royal in the best sense of the word. Vegeta's journey with power transformations reveals his character in interesting ways. Each of his major transformations comes at a moment of personal crisis. Super Saiyan came when he finally broke through his self-imposed limitations. Super Saiyan 2 came when he allowed himself to be controlled by Babidi out of desperation. Super Saiyan Blue came through disciplined training with Whis. Each transformation represents not just increased power, but a different stage in his psychological development. The ways he achieves these forms reveal what motivates him at each point in his life. The concept of atonement is central to understanding Vegeta's later character. He carries the weight of countless deaths from his days as a planet-conquering warrior under Frieza. While he never dwells on this explicitly, his actions suggest that he is aware of his past sins. His willingness to sacrifice himself, his protection of others, his choice to fight threats to Earth, even when it does not benefit him personally, all of these can be read as attempts to balance cosmic scales that will never actually balance. Vegeta knows he can never undo what he did, but he can choose to be different going forward, and that choice defines the second half of his life. Vegeta's pride is often portrayed as his fatal flaw, but it is more complex than simple arrogance. His pride is connected to his sense of identity and self-worth in ways that make it almost impossible to separate from who he is. When he is told to suppress his pride, he is essentially being told to become someone else. The journey of his character is not about eliminating pride, but about channeling it in healthier directions. Pride in protecting his family, pride in his growth as a warrior, pride in standing alongside Goku rather than above him. The pride itself never disappears, it just finds better targets. The visual design of Vegeta has remained remarkably consistent throughout Dragon Ball's decades-long run. While his armor and clothing have changed, his core appearance, the widow's peak, the stern expression, the compact, powerful build, has stayed essentially the same. This consistency helps reinforce his role as a constant in the series, a fixed point that other elements revolve around. While Goku's appearance and personality remain eternally youthful, Vegeta looks and acts like someone who carries weight, both literally in his muscular frame and figuratively in his serious demeanor. Vegeta's voice acting in both Japanese and English versions has been crucial to the character's success. In Japanese, Ryul Horikawa has voiced Vegeta for decades, bringing a specific intensity and pride to every line. In English, Christopher Sabat has similarly made the character iconic with a voice that sounds both regal and threatening. The consistency of these voice actors has helped maintain Vegeta's character across different story arcs and series. The voice is so associated with the character that many fans cannot imagine anyone else in the role. The number of times Vegeta has died and been revived is surprisingly high for a main character. He dies on Namek fighting Frieza. He dies during the Buu saga as Majin Vegeta. He is erased by Beerus in the manga continuity, but restored when Whis rewinds time. Each death represents a narrative reset, a chance for the character to come back changed. Unlike characters who stay dead, Vegeta's repeated resurrections allow his development to continue across multiple story arcs, showing that growth is not a single moment of change, but a continuous process. Vegeta's relationships with other Earth warriors like Krillin, Gohan, and Yamcha reveal his capacity for growth in subtle ways. Early in the series, he views them with complete contempt, barely considering them worth acknowledging. As time progresses, while he never becomes warm towards them, he develops a grudging respect. He trains with them, fights alongside them, and occasionally even follows their strategic suggestions. He never apologizes for his initial cruelty, but his changed behavior speaks louder than words. These relationships show that Vegeta can learn to value people beyond their power levels, a complete reversal of his original Saiyan mindset. The Gallic Gun technique that Vegeta uses in his first battle with Goku represents his Saiyan heritage and fighting style. It is a technique of overwhelming destructive force, meant to obliterate rather than outmaneuver. The fact that Goku counters it with the Kamehameha, a technique he learned from Master Roshi, represents the clash between Saiyan warrior culture and Earth's martial arts tradition. Throughout the series, Vegeta continues to favor techniques that emphasize raw power, the Big Bang attack, the final flash, the final explosion, all of which reflect his preference for decisive, crushing victories rather than technical superiority.
Vegeta's education and knowledge about the universe is greater than most of the Earth warriors because he spent years traveling through space under Frieza's command. He knows about different alien species, planets, and the political structures of the universe in ways that Goku does not. This knowledge occasionally proves useful, like when he explains the significance of Frieza's transformations or warns about the dangers of Majin Buu. His cosmic perspective should theoretically make Earth seem insignificant, yet he chooses to make it his home and protect it, showing that significance is about emotional connection rather than objective importance. The dynamic between Vegeta and Gohan is particularly interesting because Gohan represents what Vegeta wishes he could be, someone who effortlessly surpasses his limits when needed. During the Cell Saga, Vegeta witnesses Gohan achieve Super Saiyan 2 and defeat Cell, accomplishing what Vegeta's pride had made impossible. Later, when Gohan stops training and becomes weaker, Vegeta seems almost disappointed, as if Gohan's abandonment of fighting is a waste of potential that Vegeta finds personally offensive. This reaction reveals that Vegeta, despite his self-focus, does care about the warrior culture and wants to see strong fighters push themselves, even if they are not rivals. Vegeta's fusion with Goku to create Vegeto is significant because it requires him to literally merge with the person he has spent his life trying to surpass. The Potara fusion is described as permanent, meaning Vegeta agreed to end his individual existence and become part of a combined being. This decision shows that, despite all his pride and need for individual recognition, Vegeta can make the ultimate sacrifice when necessary. The fact that the fusion was not actually permanent is almost beside the point. What matters is that Vegeta was willing to give up everything, including his own identity, to protect his family and the universe. The contrast between Vegeto and Gogeta, the two fused forms of Goku and Vegeta, reveals interesting aspects of their relationship. Vegeto, created by the Potara earrings, is cocky and playful, suggesting that Goku's personality dominates the fusion. Gogeta, created by the fusion dance, is more serious and focused, suggesting a better balance between their personalities. Fans often debate which fusion is stronger, but the real difference is philosophical. Vegeto plays with his opponents to draw out their full strength, while Gogeta aims for efficient victory. Both approaches exist within Goku and Vegeta separately, but the fusions express them in pure forms. Vegeta's reluctance to perform the fusion dance stems from his pride, but also from something deeper. The fusion dance requires synchronized movements and cooperation that go against his self-reliant nature. The poses look ridiculous, which Vegeta finds humiliating, but more than that, the dance requires him to be completely in sync with Goku, to trust him completely and move as one. This level of cooperation is profoundly difficult for someone who has spent his life maintaining emotional and tactical independence. Every time Vegeta agrees to fuse, he is overcoming not just pride, but his fundamental approach to existence. The fact that Vegeta never learns the instant transmission technique is interesting because he clearly could if he wanted to. Goku learned it during his time on Yardrat, and Vegeta has had opportunities to learn similar techniques. His refusal suggests that he wants to forge his own path, to develop abilities that are distinctly his, rather than copying Goku's toolkit. This is part of his growth. Instead of obsessing over matching Goku skill for skill, he focuses on developing his own strengths. It is a mature recognition that being different does not mean being inferior. Vegeta's attitude toward the Dragon Balls evolves throughout the series. Initially, he seeks them for immortality, viewing them as a tool for ultimate power. Later, he accepts being revived by them after heroic sacrifices. By Super, he seems almost uncomfortable with how easily death can be undone, suggesting that the Dragon Balls undermine the meaning of sacrifice and risk. This evolution reflects his changing values, from seeing death as failure to seeing death as a meaningful choice, to seeing resurrection as possibly cheapening that choice. His discomfort with easy resurrection shows that he now values the weight of consequences. The respect Vegeta shows to Goku at the end of Dragon Ball Z, when he finally acknowledges Goku as better, represents the culmination of his entire character arc. This is not a defeated admission, but an honest recognition of something he has known but refused to accept. By saying this, Vegeta is not diminishing himself, but rather freeing himself from the burden of needing to be number one. He can now compete with Goku as an equal, in spirit if not always in power, without his entire self-worth depending on the outcome. This acceptance is paradoxically what allows him to keep improving, because he is no longer fighting against reality, but working within it. Vegeta's relationship with training is almost ascetic in its intensity. He treats training as a form of meditation, punishment, and worship all at once. The scenes of him training alone, pushing himself to unconsciousness, reflect a warrior monk's dedication to his craft. Unlike Goku, who trains because he enjoys it, Vegeta trains with grim determination, as if every moment not training is a moment wasted. This difference reveals their core distinction. Goku is motivated by joy, Vegeta by duty. Both approaches lead to strength, but the journey is completely different. The theme of nature versus nurture runs through Vegeta's entire story. He was born royal, born elite, born with high power level and advantageous genetics. Yet his brother Tarbal, who was also royal, was weak and sent away from planet Vegeta. This suggests that birth advantage means little without the right environment and personal drive. Vegeta's true strength comes not from his bloodline, but from his relentless refusal to accept limitation. Goku, born low class but raised with Earth's values, surpasses him. This reversal must have been psychologically devastating for someone raised to believe breeding determined worth. Vegeta's interaction with other universes in Dragon Ball Super expands his perspective beyond just competing with Goku. Meeting warriors like Jiren, Toppo, and Hit shows him that strength exists in forms he never imagined. These encounters force him to adapt and grow in new directions. His rivalry with Jiren's Pride Drooper ideology is particularly interesting because they represent different interpretations of pride. Jiren's pride is tied to absolute strength and stoic isolation, while Vegeta's pride has evolved to include connection and protection. Their battle is philosophical as much as physical. When Vegeta takes on students or mentors others, which happens occasionally in Super, he is surprisingly effective despite his gruff exterior. He understands combat at a deep level and can articulate what needs to be done even if his teaching methods are harsh. The fact that Kaba, a Universe 6 Saiyan, treats Vegeta with such respect and considers him a master shows that Vegeta has qualities worth emulating. Teaching forces Vegeta to examine his own methods and philosophies, making him more self-aware. It is another form of growth that complements his martial development.
Vegeta's awareness of his own character flaws, particularly in Super, shows remarkable self-knowledge. He explicitly acknowledges his arrogance when explaining his transformation to Goku. He admits his tendency to overthink. He recognizes patterns in his own behavior that have led to defeat. This metacognition is sophisticated for someone often portrayed as stubborn and unchanging. It suggests that Vegeta's problem was never lack of awareness, but rather inability to overcome ingrained habits. By Super, he has developed enough discipline to recognize flaws and actively work against them rather than just knowing they exist. The economic situation of Vegeta living at Capsule Corporation is rarely addressed, but interesting to consider. He does not appear to have a job, living off Bulma's family wealth while training constantly. This arrangement works because Capsule Corporation has infinite resources, but it places Vegeta in a dependent position that earlier versions of his character would have found intolerable. His acceptance of this situation shows maturity. He recognizes that protecting Earth is valuable work even if not formally compensated. And he has grown secure enough in himself that financial dependence does not threaten his identity. Pride has limits when practical considerations are involved. Vegeta's legacy as a character extends beyond Dragon Ball into broader anime culture. He established the archetype of the proud rival who slowly becomes an ally, a template that countless other series have followed. The rival, who gradually respects the protagonist character type, owes much to how Vegeta was developed. His influence can be seen in characters like Sasuke from Naruto, Bakugo from My Hero Academia, and many others. The complexity of his redemption arc, taking place over hundreds of episodes and multiple story arcs, showed that character development could happen gradually rather than through single transformative moments. The importance of Vegeta as a father figure represents a type of masculinity rarely explored in shonen anime of his era. He is not the absent father or the perfect father, but something more realistic, present but imperfect, caring but unable to express it naturally, trying but often failing. His awkward attempts to connect with his children, his obvious discomfort with emotional vulnerability, his fierce protection despite emotional distance, all of these make him a complicated parent. This complexity makes him relatable to audiences who understand that being a good parent is not about being perfect, but about consistently trying to do better. As we reach the end of this first part of our journey through Vegeta's story, let your mind rest on these images of transformation and growth. Picture the young prince watching his planet explode, the ruthless warrior conquering worlds, the desperate fighter training in impossible gravity, the proud Saiyan finally admitting his rival's strength, the father rushing to see his daughter born. These moments tell the story of someone who began as a villain and became a hero not through sudden change, but through decades of gradual growth, countless choices to be slightly better than yesterday, to care about something beyond himself. Let these thoughts carry you gently into sleep, knowing that growth is always possible, that pride can coexist with humility, and that even the most rigid person can learn to bend without breaking. Vegeta's complicated relationship with the concept of mercy reveals layers of his moral development that are easy to overlook. In his early appearances, he shows no mercy whatsoever, killing Nappa without hesitation and destroying the Namekian village with cold efficiency. This absence of mercy was not cruelty for its own sake, but a logical extension of his worldview where weakness deserved elimination. As the series progresses, Vegeta begins sparing opponents, but often for strategic reasons rather than compassion. He spares the Earth Warriors after his first defeat because he intends to return stronger. He works alongside the heroes on Namek out of necessity. The first time Vegeta shows genuine mercy, mercy that serves no strategic purpose and actually works against his interests, is arguably when he helps Goku against Majin Buu after being revived. This moment represents a fundamental shift in his moral framework, where he chooses to help not because it benefits him, but because it is right. The psychological impact of being constantly compared to Goku cannot be overstated. Every person Vegeta meets who knows them both inevitably makes the comparison, and Vegeta always comes up short in their estimation. The Earth Warriors prefer Goku's company, Bulma occasionally contrasts them, even enemies and gods consistently acknowledge Goku as the primary threat.
This constant secondary status would break most people, creating either complete despair or violent rejection. Vegeta experiences both at different times, but ultimately finds a third path: acceptance without surrender. He accepts that others may never see him as first, but he refuses to stop striving. This balance between acceptance and ambition is psychologically sophisticated, requiring him to hold two contradictory truths simultaneously. Vegeta's understanding of ki control and energy manipulation is highly refined, possibly more so than Goku's. While Goku has greater raw power and instinct, Vegeta's technical precision with energy attacks is remarkable. His final flash against Cell is notable not just for its power, but for the control required to charge and direct that much energy without destroying the Earth. His ability to sense ki across vast distances, to suppress his own power level, to manipulate energy for various techniques, all demonstrate a mastery that comes from study and practice rather than natural talent. This technical expertise reflects his approach to everything. Where Goku relies on intuition, Vegeta relies on understanding. The Saiyan tail and its removal represent an interesting aspect of Vegeta's character. Unlike Goku, who lost his tail early and never missed it, Vegeta's tail was part of his Saiyan identity. The tail allowed transformation into the great ape form, a source of Saiyan pride and power. When Vegeta's tail is permanently removed, he loses a connection to his heritage, but gains freedom from a weakness that could be exploited. The absence of his tail in later arcs is never mentioned, but it symbolizes his gradual separation from pure Saiyan identity, and his adaptation to a new life where raw destructive power matters less than controlled, purposeful strength. Vegeta's experience with mind control, both by Babidi and later threats, reveals his mental fortitude and also his vulnerabilities.
Babidi could only control Vegeta because Vegeta allowed it, wanting to reclaim what he saw as his lost edge. This suggests that Vegeta's greatest weakness is not external threats, but his own internal conflicts. When he is at peace with himself, as in later super arcs, he becomes nearly impossible to manipulate mentally. The strength of his will, the same force that drives his endless training, also protects his mind. However, that same willpower can be turned against him when he directs it towards self-destructive goals, as Babidi exploited. The contrast between Vegeta's leadership style and Goku's non-leadership reveals different approaches to responsibility. Goku never wants to lead and actively avoids being put in charge, preferring to follow his instincts and let situations unfold. Vegeta, trained as a prince, has leadership instincts but rarely gets to exercise them because Goku's presence naturally draws others to follow him. When Vegeta does lead, such as coordinating efforts during certain battles, he is strategic and decisive. His frustration at never being seen as the leader, despite arguably being more qualified in traditional leadership terms, adds another dimension to his rivalry with Goku. It is not just about power, but about the role each plays in their group.
Vegeta's awareness of narrative patterns and metatextual elements occasionally breaks through in interesting ways. He seems to understand that certain patterns repeat, that Goku will always arrive to save the day, that transformations will appear when needed. This awareness does not break the fourth wall, but suggests that Vegeta has lived through enough cycles to recognize the story he is in. His complaints about always being second, his frustration with predictable outcomes, could be read as a character becoming aware of his narrative function. This adds a tragic dimension. He is fighting not just to be stronger, but to break free from a story that has already decided his role. The few times we see Vegeta laugh genuinely, not in mockery or cruelty, but in actual enjoyment, are notable for their rarity. These moments usually involve battle, the thrill of facing a strong opponent or successfully executing a difficult technique. His smile during certain fights in Super, particularly against opponents he respects, shows that he has developed the ability to enjoy combat, the way Goku does, without needing it to prove something. This evolution suggests that Vegeta has found elements of joy in his warrior life beyond just the validation of victory. He is learning to appreciate the moment rather than always focusing on the outcome. Vegeta's relationship with Earth itself is worth examining. He chose to stay on Earth not because it was his only option, but because something about the planet appealed to him. Earth has weaker warriors than many planets he conquered, less advanced technology than his travels exposed him to, and initially no personal connections for him. Yet Earth became home. Perhaps it was the planet's role as a constant battlefield that attracted him, or maybe the presence of strong fighters to challenge him. More likely, Earth represented a place where he could be something other than what he was raised to be. On Earth, nobody expected him to be the prince of a dead race, or Frieza's soldier. He could define himself by his choices rather than his history.
The symbolism of Vegeta's blue bodysuit that he wears under his armor connects to his Saiyan military heritage. It is a uniform that countless Saiyan warriors wore, including his father. By continuing to wear it throughout the series, even when he adopts Earth-style training clothes occasionally, Vegeta maintains a visual connection to his origins. The bodysuit is a reminder of where he came from, even as everything else about him changes. When he eventually abandons the armor in Super for simpler training gear, it represents another step in his evolution, a willingness to let go of outward symbols of his past while maintaining his inner identity. Vegeta's cooking skills, revealed in a humorous moment in Super, surprised fans who assumed he had never done anything domestic. The revelation that he can cook well enough to prepare meals for his family adds an unexpected dimension to his character. It shows that during his years at Capsule Corporation, he learned practical skills that have nothing to do with fighting. This small detail humanizes him in ways that major battles cannot, showing that he has built a real life beyond training and combat. The Prince of all Saiyans, conqueror of worlds, standing in a kitchen preparing dinner, is absurd and perfect, and shows how far he has come from the warrior who arrived on Earth. The way Vegeta processes trauma differs markedly from how Goku handles it.
Goku tends to compartmentalize or simply not dwell on painful experiences, moving forward with his characteristic optimism. Vegeta, by contrast, carries his trauma visibly. The destruction of his planet, the years serving Frieza, every defeat and humiliation. All of these experiences shape his personality in obvious ways. He does not forget or forgive, neither others nor himself. This difference in trauma processing explains much of their personality divergence. Goku's resilience comes from an ability to let go, while Vegeta's comes from an ability to endure while remembering. Neither approach is better, but they produce very different people. Vegeta's rare moments of humor are almost always delivered with a completely straight face, making them funnier for their unexpectedness. His sarcastic comments, his deadpan observations about absurd situations, his occasional wordplay all demonstrate that beneath the serious exterior exists someone who understands irony and absurdity. He simply chooses to maintain his dignified bearing even when making jokes. This restrained humor is very different from Goku's more obvious comedy, which often comes from obliviousness. Vegeta's humor comes from awareness, from seeing the ridiculousness of a situation and commenting on it while maintaining his composure. The physical toll that Vegeta's training takes on his body is rarely discussed, but must be immense. He regularly pushes himself to unconsciousness, trains in gravity levels that would crush normal humans, and deliberately subjects himself to punishing regimens that would break anyone with less willpower. The long-term effects of this training on his body, the strain on his muscles and bones, the constant state of damage and recovery, represent a form of self-harm disguised as self-improvement. Yet Vegeta sees this suffering as necessary, almost sacred. Pain is proof of effort, exhaustion is proof of dedication. His relationship with his own body is complicated, treating it simultaneously as a temple to be perfected and a tool to be used without mercy. Vegeta's mathematical and strategic intelligence is demonstrated in how he analyzes power levels and calculates battle outcomes. During the Saiyan and Frieza sagas especially, he is constantly running numbers in his head, estimating whether he can win, calculating how much stronger he needs to become, predicting opponent capabilities based on their demonstrated power. This analytical approach to combat is very different from Goku's intuitive style. Vegeta fights like a general planning a campaign, while Goku fights like an artist improvising. Both approaches have merit, but Vegeta's requires more conscious cognitive work, suggesting that his fighting genius is cultivated rather than innate. The evolution of Vegeta's opinion of fusion is fascinating to track across the series. Initially, he would have found the concept of fusion revolting, a dissolution of individual identity that contradicts everything he believes about personal strength. When first faced with the Potara fusion, he resists despite the necessity. By the time of the fusion dance with Goku against Broly in the Super movie, while still reluctant, he agrees more quickly and with less complaint. This growing acceptance of fusion as a tool represents his decreasing attachment to ego and increasing focus on pragmatic victory. He still does not like it, but he no longer sees it as a fundamental violation of his identity. Vegeta's competitive relationship with himself is as intense as his rivalry with Goku. He constantly measures his current self against his past self, against what he should be, against his potential. This internal competition never ends because he can always imagine a stronger version of himself. Unlike Goku, who competes with others for the joy of challenge, Vegeta competes with his own idealized self-image, a target that recedes as he approaches it. This is psychologically exhausting, creating a state where achievement never brings satisfaction because the goalpost immediately moves. His growth in later series comes partly from learning to acknowledge progress rather than only seeing the distance remaining. The significance of Vegeta maintaining his name as just Vegeta without a surname or additional identifier connects to his princely identity. In many cultures, royalty often goes by a single name, the name being sufficient identification because of their status. By continuing to use only Vegeta, he maintains this royal bearing, even in a context where it is meaningless. He does not become Vegeta Brief after marrying Bulma, does not adopt Earth naming conventions, remains simply Vegeta. This small detail shows his refusal to fully assimilate, to maintain some distinction between himself and his adopted planet. His name is his identity, and changing it would be abandoning the last piece of his heritage. Vegeta's understanding of mortality evolved significantly across the series. As a young warrior, death was something that happened to the weak, a fate he would avoid through strength. His first death forced him to confront mortality personally, to experience the ultimate defeat. Each subsequent death and revival changed his relationship with mortality, making it less abstract. By later arcs, Vegeta seems to have made peace with the idea that death is natural and inevitable, even for warriors. This acceptance allows him to make sacrifices without hesitation, to risk death without the fear that initially motivated his quest for immortality. He no longer needs to live forever because he has found things worth dying for. The way other characters describe Vegeta when he is not present reveals how he is perceived by those who know him. Bulma talks about him with a mixture of exasperation and affection, complaining about his training obsession while clearly respecting his dedication. Goku speaks of Vegeta with genuine respect, often seeming to value Vegeta's rivalry more than Vegeta does.
Trunks describes his father with complicated feelings, wanting approval while questioning his methods. These external perspectives create a fuller picture of Vegeta than his own self-perception allows. He sees himself as a warrior first and everything else second, but others see a more complete person, someone who has become far more than the role he limits himself to. Vegeta's reaction to discovering the existence of other universes in Super represents a paradigm shift in his worldview. He spent his entire life thinking of strength in terms of Universe 7's power scale, with himself and Goku at the top. Learning that entire universes of potentially stronger warriors exist could have broken his spirit, or reignited his desperate need to be number one. Instead, he treats it as motivation without obsession, another challenge to face without losing himself in the pursuit. This measured response shows maturity that younger Vegeta lacked. He can now face the possibility of never being the strongest without it destroying his sense of self-worth. The moments when Vegeta shows fear are rare but revealing. He feared Frieza genuinely, a fear born from years of servitude and witnessing Frieza's casual cruelty. He showed fear when Beerus arrived, understanding that a god of destruction was beyond anything he could fight. His fear for his family's safety appears in several arcs, a different kind of fear than personal danger creates. These moments of fear humanize him because fear requires having something to lose.
The young Vegeta who arrived on Earth had nothing to lose but pride, making him fearless in a limited way. The older Vegeta has family, friends, a home, all of which can be threatened, making him both more vulnerable and more courageous when he overcomes that fear. Vegeta's body language communicates volumes even when he is silent. His crossed arms, his permanent scowl, his refusal to face people directly when speaking to them, all of these gestures create a barrier between himself and others. Over time, this body language subtly shifts. In later series, he stands more openly, crosses his arms less defensively, and occasionally makes direct eye contact during serious conversations. These small changes in posture and gesture reflect his gradual opening to emotional connection. The physical barriers he maintained are slowly lowering, allowing him to be more present with the people around him even as he maintains his serious demeanor. The theme of legacy weighs heavily on Vegeta in ways that do not affect Goku. As the prince of all Saiyans, Vegeta is technically responsible for continuing the Saiyan race and passing on its culture. Yet the Saiyan culture he knew was brutal and destructive, built on conquest and murder. What parts of that legacy should he pass to Trunks and Bula? What does it mean to be Saiyan when only a handful remain? Vegeta seems to have decided to pass on the pride and strength of Saiyans while leaving behind the cruelty and destructiveness. He is editing his heritage in real time, keeping what he values and discarding what he now sees as toxic. This selective inheritance shows sophisticated thinking about culture and tradition. Vegeta's preferred fighting distance is closer than Goku's, reflecting their different combat philosophies. He likes to be in his opponent's face, overwhelming them with aggressive combinations and raw power at close range. Goku fights at more varied range, flowing between close and distant combat as the situation demands. This preference for close combat connects to Vegeta's personality. He confronts problems directly rather than dancing around them. There is no subtlety in his approach, no deception. He wants his opponents to see him coming, to know exactly who is defeating them. This straightforward aggression is both a strength and a weakness, effective against most opponents, but predictable against those who can exploit patterns. The guilt that Vegeta must feel about his past, though rarely expressed directly, influences many of his later decisions. He killed countless beings during his years as Frieza's soldier, destroyed civilizations, ended worlds. While he can justify some of this as following orders under threat, there were clearly moments where he exceeded what was necessary, where cruelty was a choice rather than a requirement. This guilt probably motivates his willingness to sacrifice himself repeatedly, his dedication to protecting Earth, his hard work to be better than he was. He cannot bring back the people he killed or rebuild the worlds he destroyed, but he can ensure that no one else experiences what his victims did. It is inadequate atonement for unforgivable acts, but it is the only path available to him. Vegeta's respect for warriors who fight with honor, even enemies, suggests a code of conduct that persists despite his brutal pragmatism. He respects opponents who face him directly, who fight at full strength, who refuse to give up. This respect occasionally leads to decisions that seem contradictory, like allowing enemies to power up or acknowledging their strength even as he defeats them. His warrior code is distinct from Earth's martial arts philosophy that Goku absorbed, more similar to a samurai's bushido or a knight's chivalry. Combat is not just about winning, but about how you conduct yourself in battle. Dishonorable tactics bother him more than they should if he were purely pragmatic. The way Vegeta deals with boredom during peacetime reveals another dimension of his character. He cannot simply relax and enjoy peace the way Goku struggles to. Where Goku becomes restless and looks for fights, Vegeta fills peaceful periods with training and family time, creating structure to avoid the emptiness that peace might bring. He needs purpose, and when there are no threats to fight, he creates purpose through self-improvement and domestic responsibility. This difference suggests that Vegeta has developed healthier coping mechanisms for peace than Goku, who often seems lost without conflict to focus on. Vegeta's technological literacy is surprisingly low, despite living with the world's leading technology family. He understands Saiyan and Frieza Force technology from his upbringing, but Earth technology seems to confuse or bore him. He is never shown using computers, struggling with communication devices, or engaging with Capsule Corporation's inventions beyond the gravity room. This selective incompetence suggests that he only learns what is necessary for his goals. Technology that does not make him stronger holds no interest, which is consistent with his single-minded focus, but also somewhat limiting. In an age where information and communication are forms of power, his willful ignorance of these tools represents a blind spot.
The philosophical question of whether Vegeta is good or simply not evil anymore is worth considering. He fights threats to Earth and protects innocent people. But is this morality or pragmatism? Does he save people because it is right, or because Earth is his home and these people are under his protection? The answer seems to be that it started as pragmatism and gradually became genuine morality. But the transition was so gradual that even Vegeta probably could not identify when it happened. He does not perform good acts for reward or recognition, suggesting that the goodness has become internalized rather than performative. By late Super, his heroism seems authentic rather than calculated, a fundamental change in character that took decades to complete. Vegeta's relationship with the concept of destiny is complicated by his status as prince of a destroyed race. He was destined to be king, but that destiny was destroyed when Frieza obliterated planet Vegeta. This might have freed him from destiny entirely, allowing him to choose his own path, or it might have trapped him in a permanent state of unfulfilled destiny. His obsession with becoming the strongest could be read as trying to fulfill the royal destiny he was denied to be the most powerful being in existence since he cannot be the king. Alternatively, his growth and change could represent him embracing freedom from predetermined roles. Whether he is fleeing destiny or chasing it remains ambiguous. The symbolism of Vegeta's frequent defeats throughout the series could be read as necessary humbling experiences, but they also represent something more profound. Each defeat teaches him that strength alone is insufficient, that power without wisdom leads to failure, that pride creates blind spots enemies can exploit. These are lessons that someone who learned only combat in childhood desperately needs. His defeats are educational in ways that victories could never be, forcing him to examine his assumptions and grow beyond them. In this sense, his defeats are gifts, though painful ones, that gradually transform him from a one-dimensional warrior into a complete person. Vegeta's aging, or lack thereof due to Saiyan biology, raises interesting questions about his future. Saiyans remain in their prime until very late in life, then age rapidly. This means Vegeta will likely maintain his strength and appearance for decades, long after normal humans would have declined. What will it mean for him to watch his Earth friends age while he remains unchanged? Will he outlive Bulma significantly? These questions about time and mortality add poignancy to his choice to build a life on Earth with humans. He is committing to relationships that have expiration dates, to loving people who will age and die while he continues in his prime. This acceptance of eventual loss shows remarkable emotional bravery. The contrast between how Vegeta treats children and how he treats adults reveals his capacity for softness that he hides. He is generally gentler with children, less harsh in their judgments, more patient with their mistakes. This is particularly visible in his interactions with young Trunks, Bula, and even other children like Pan. He seems to understand that children are still forming,
that they deserve a chance to become strong before being judged as weak. This protectiveness toward the young suggests that despite his harsh exterior, he values innocence and potential. Adults get his full, brutal honesty, but children receive a modified version, tough but not crushing. Vegeta's understanding of teamwork evolved from viewing others as obstacles to recognizing them as potential multipliers of strength. Early Vegeta worked alone because he trusted no one and saw cooperation as weakness. By Super, he fights alongside others effectively, coordinating techniques, covering weaknesses, and even following others' plans when they make sense. This evolution required him to overcome pride that said needing help was failure, to recognize that combined strength could exceed individual limits. His growth into a team fighter while maintaining individual strength represents a synthesis of his warrior upbringing with Earth's more cooperative fighting style. The energy that Vegeta puts into maintaining his pride and reputation must be exhausting. Every interaction requires him to project strength, to never show weakness, to maintain the image of an elite warrior. The constant vigilance this requires, monitoring his own behavior and others' perceptions, creates a performance that he can never fully escape. Over time, this performance has become more natural, but it remains a performance nonetheless. The rare moments when he drops this guard, when he is genuinely vulnerable or open, feel transgressive and risky because he has built his entire social identity on never appearing weak. The energy required to maintain this facade for decades is itself a demonstration of his extraordinary willpower. Vegeta's preferred methods of meditation and mental training are distinct from the calm, peaceful meditation that Piccolo practices. When Vegeta meditates, even in stillness, there's intensity. He is not emptying his mind, but focusing it, visualizing battles, reviewing techniques, planning training regimens. His meditation is active rather than passive, another form of work rather than rest. This difference reflects fundamental personality distinctions. Where others find peace in emptiness, Vegeta finds purpose in focus. His mind is not built for peace, but for directed intensity. Rest for him is simply redirected effort rather than genuine relaxation. The fact that Vegeta never seeks out the Namekian Dragon Balls to wish back planet Vegeta or resurrect the Saiyan race is telling. He has access to wish-granting artifacts powerful enough to undo genocide, yet he never uses them for this purpose. This suggests that he has made peace with the destruction of his homeland, that he recognizes the Saiyan culture he knew was destructive and perhaps deserved its fate. By not resurrecting planet Vegeta, he is choosing to move forward rather than backward, to build something new rather than restore something broken. This passive choice to let the past remain past shows wisdom that younger Vegeta would have called betrayal. Vegeta's humor, what little exists, tends toward the dark and sarcastic. He finds gallows humor in desperate situations, makes cutting observations about absurdity, and occasionally demonstrates a dry wit that catches people off guard. This humor serves as both sword and shield, allowing him to comment on situations while maintaining emotional distance. His jokes, when they come, often have edges that cut as much as they amuse. This sardonic approach to humor fits his personality perfectly, conveying intelligence and observation while never requiring him to be vulnerable or silly in ways that would threaten his dignity.
The transformation requirements for Super Saiyan forms beyond the first level represent interesting thresholds in Vegeta's development. Super Saiyan 2 required him to push beyond natural limits through training. Super Saiyan 3 he never achieved, perhaps because it required a type of limit breaking that did not suit his methodical approach. Super Saiyan God and Blue came through ritual and training with divine beings. Each transformation represents not just power, but a philosophical shift in how he approaches strength. His willingness to pursue divine power,
something that would have seemed like blasphemy to young Vegeta, who trusted only Saiyan might, shows how far his thinking has evolved. Vegeta's protectiveness toward Earth has grown from simple pragmatism to genuine attachment. Early on, he protected Earth because he lived there and it served his purposes. Later, he protects it because it is home, because the people there matter to him, because it represents the life he has built. This attachment to place, to a specific planet rather than just surviving anywhere, gives him roots that he never had before. The nomadic warrior who traveled from conquest to conquest has become someone with a home worth defending. This transformation from wanderer to guardian represents one of his most fundamental character changes. As you continue to drift, let these images of complexity and contradiction guide you deeper into rest. Picture Vegeta standing at the edge of a cliff, looking out over the Earth he chose to protect. Behind him is the shadow of who he was, the destroyer of worlds. Before him is the future, uncertain but full of people he has learned to care for. In his chest burns the eternal fire of pride, but it no longer consumes him. It warms instead of burns. He is not the strongest, may never be, but he is strong enough. He is not the hero of this story, but he is a hero nonetheless. Let this image of earned peace carry you into your own rest, knowing that change is always possible, that yesterday's villain can become tomorrow's protector, and that strength comes in forms that cannot be measured in power levels. The meditation techniques that Vegeta developed over years of solitary training reflect a mind that cannot rest in conventional ways. While Earth's martial artists learn to quiet their thoughts and find inner peace, Vegeta's meditation involves controlled intensity, a focusing of mental energy rather than its dispersal. He visualizes combat scenarios with perfect clarity, replays past battles to identify mistakes, and mentally rehearses techniques until they become instinctive. This approach to meditation is closer to what elite athletes call visualization training, creating neural pathways through mental practice. The idea of simply sitting and emptying his mind would feel like wasted time to Vegeta, a luxury he cannot afford when Goku might be training. Even in stillness, he is working, improving, refusing to allow a single moment to pass without purpose. The way Vegeta processes failure has evolved dramatically from his early days. Initially, any defeat was a catastrophe that sent him into spirals of rage and self-recrimination. He could not contextualize failure as anything but proof of worthlessness. Over time, particularly after repeated defeats and resurrections, he developed a more sophisticated relationship with failure. He began to see defeats as data points, information about what he needed to improve, rather than absolute judgments on his character. This evolution was crucial because his early relationship with failure was unsustainable, creating a cycle where fear of failure led to reckless decisions that caused more failures. By learning to fail without being destroyed by it, Vegeta became paradoxically stronger, able to take risks and learn from mistakes rather than being paralyzed by the possibility of defeat. Vegeta's cultural isolation is rarely discussed, but must be profound. He is one of the last remaining full-blooded Saiyans, carrying memories of a culture that no longer exists. The language, customs,
stories and traditions of his people died with planet Vegeta. He has no one to share these memories with, no one who understands what it means to be Saiyan in the way he does. Goku was raised on Earth and never knew Saiyan culture. The half-Saiyan children, like Gohan and Trunks, are culturally human. Vegeta is a living museum of a dead civilization, carrying knowledge and context that will die with him. This loneliness, the isolation of being the last keeper of traditions no one else values, adds another layer to his character. He cannot even properly mourn his culture because no one around him understands what was lost. The strategic value that Vegeta brings to group battles is often overshadowed by raw power discussions, but his tactical mind is exceptional. He reads battles like chess games, identifying patterns in enemy behavior, recognizing when to press advantage and when to retreat. His military training under the Frieza Force, terrible as it was, taught him how to analyze opponents systematically. He notices details that pure fighters like Goku miss: weaknesses in technique, patterns in movement, tells that predict attacks. This analytical combat style makes him particularly effective against technical fighters who rely on specific strategies. Against pure power fighters, his analysis matters less. But against martial artists with refined techniques, his ability to deconstruct and counter their approaches gives him advantages that raw strength cannot provide. Vegeta's relationship with technology, specifically the gravity training room, borders on addiction. He spends countless hours in artificially enhanced gravity, pushing his body beyond natural limits. The gravity room becomes a sanctuary where the only variables are his effort and the machine's settings. A controlled environment where pure work translates directly to results. Unlike real combat, which involves unpredictable opponents and circumstances beyond his control, the gravity room offers a space where he faces only himself and physics. This preference for controlled training over sparring reflects his need for independence and his discomfort with vulnerability that comes from training with partners who might see his weaknesses.
Vegeta's naming of his techniques reveals something about his psychology. Final Flash, Big Bang Attack, Final Explosion, all of his signature moves have names that suggest finality and overwhelming force. There is no subtlety or cleverness in these names, just straightforward declarations of destructive intent. This naming convention reflects his direct approach to everything. He does not trick or deceive, he announces his power and forces opponents to face it head-on. The names also carry a certain grandiosity that matches his royal bearing. These are not the humble names of a student learning techniques, but the declarations of a prince commanding forces of nature. The psychological impact of Vegeta witnessing Goku's death and resurrection multiple times creates a complicated dynamic. Each time Goku dies heroically, he sets a standard for meaningful death, for sacrifice that matters. When Vegeta attempts his own heroic sacrifice against Majin Buu, he is partly trying to match Goku's example, to prove that he too can choose others over himself. The fact that Goku's sacrifices often have more lasting impact, that people mourn Goku more openly, that his deaths feel more significant, must rankle Vegeta, even as he grows beyond petty competition. He wants his sacrifices to matter not for recognition, but for proof that he has truly changed, that he is capable of the same selflessness that comes naturally to Goku. Vegeta's understanding of pain, both giving and receiving it, is highly developed. He has inflicted enormous suffering on countless beings and has himself been tortured, beaten, and pushed beyond the limits of endurance. This intimate familiarity with pain in all its forms has made him both harder and, surprisingly, more capable of empathy when he chooses to exercise it. He understands suffering in ways that someone who has lived a gentler life cannot. When he sees others in pain, he recognizes it because he has been there. This does not make him gentle or particularly comforting, but it does give him a certain respect for those who endure suffering without breaking. His admiration for fighters who refuse to quit, even when hopelessly outmatched, stems from this understanding that continuing despite pain is its own form of strength. The contrast between Vegeta's public persona and his private self has narrowed over time but still exists. In public, he maintains the image of the elite warrior, proud and uncompromising. In private, with his family, he allows glimpses of vulnerability and affection that he would never display openly. This division between public and private selves is not unusual, but the extreme gap in Vegeta's case suggests how much energy he expends on maintaining his reputation. The cost of this constant performance is emotional exhaustion, a need to always be on guard. The comfort he finds in private moments with his family comes partly from being able to drop this performance, to exist without the weight of his reputation for brief periods. Vegeta's response to insults and mockery has matured significantly. Early Vegeta would fly into destructive rages at the slightest perceived disrespect. Later Vegeta still dislikes insults, but has developed the confidence to ignore minor provocations. He has learned to distinguish between insults that matter and those that do not, between genuine challenges to his status and meaningless words. This ability to choose his battles, to let small insults pass without response, represents significant emotional growth. It shows security in his identity that no longer requires constant defense. He knows who he is, and the opinions of those he does not respect cannot change that. The way Vegeta handles jealousy, particularly regarding Goku's relationships and reputation, reveals his capacity for self-awareness and growth. He is jealous of how easily Goku makes friends, how people gravitate toward him, how his sacrifices are remembered and honored. But rather than letting this jealousy consume him or acting on it destructively, older Vegeta acknowledges these feelings and continues anyway. He fights alongside Goku despite the jealousy, protects the people who prefer Goku despite his hurt feelings, and continues to engage in a world that will never see him as first. This ability to function effectively despite negative emotions, to not require perfect emotional comfort to do what is right, demonstrates psychological resilience that is often overlooked. Vegeta's moments of genuine surprise are delightful because they break through his composed exterior. When something truly unexpected happens, when someone exceeds his expectations, or when events take turns he did not predict, his mask slips and we see authentic reaction. These moments are valuable because they show that beneath the controlled surface, he is still capable of wonder and surprise. His worldview, despite years of experience, has not become so rigid that new information cannot penetrate. He remains capable of learning and being impressed, which keeps him growing rather than stagnating in assumed knowledge. The burden of being the last prince of a warrior race manifests in Vegeta's desperate need to prove that Saiyans are superior. Every time he fights not just for himself, but for the legacy of his entire species. When he loses, particularly to non-Saiyans, it feels like a betrayal of his heritage. This burden would be crushing if he took it completely seriously, the responsibility to vindicate an entire, extinct civilization through his personal achievements. Fortunately, his time on Earth has given him perspective, allowing him to honor his Saiyan heritage without being entirely defined by it. He is Saiyan, but he is also more than that, a complexity that younger Vegeta would have rejected, but older Vegeta has learned to accept. Vegeta's preferred fighting conditions reveal his personality. He likes clear rules, one-on-one combat, and opponents who fight directly. He dislikes tricks, ambushes, and multiple opponents ganging up on a single fighter. This preference for honorable combat is partly Saiyan culture and partly personal taste. He wants to win, but he wants to win in ways that prove superiority conclusively. A victory gained through deception or overwhelming numbers does not satisfy him the way a clean defeat of a strong opponent does. This code of honor limits his tactical options, but also makes his victories more meaningful to him. He could fight dirty if necessary, but he chooses not to, because that kind of victory would feel hollow. The relationship between Vegeta's physical condition and his mental state is more connected than for most fighters. When he is at peak physical condition, his confidence and mental clarity are high. When injured or exhausted, his judgment suffers noticeably. This mind-body connection suggests that his sense of self is deeply tied to his physical capabilities. Unlike Goku, who maintains his cheerful personality regardless of physical condition, Vegeta's entire demeanor shifts based on his combat readiness. This makes him vulnerable to psychological attacks that target his physical state, explaining why fighters who damage his pride by damaging his body are particularly effective against him.
Vegeta's parenting philosophy, to the extent he has articulated one, seems to be teaching through example rather than instruction. He does not sit his children down for lectures about strength or pride. Instead, he demonstrates these values through his actions, hoping they will absorb them through observation. This hands-off approach comes partly from his own upbringing, which provided little in the way of nurturing guidance, and partly from his discomfort with emotional vulnerability that teaching would require. The effectiveness of this approach is debatable, but it is consistent with his character. He trusts that his children, carrying Saiyan blood, will naturally develop strength if given the opportunity to observe it. The symbolism of Vegeta's continued wearing of white gloves, even when adopting more casual training gear, is interesting. The gloves are a holdover from his Saiyan armor days, serving no practical purpose that bare hands would not serve better. Yet he keeps them, a small connection to his past that he maintains even as he lets go of other symbols. These gloves represent the parts of his heritage he chooses to keep, the aspects of being Saiyan that still have meaning for him. They are aesthetic rather than functional, suggesting that some traditions are worth maintaining simply because they connect us to who we were, even as we become someone new. Vegeta's understanding of power scaling, the way strength levels relate to each other, is more sophisticated than most characters demonstrate. He understands that being twice as strong does not mean winning twice as easily, that power differences create non-linear advantages. He recognizes tipping points where small increases in strength create disproportionate advantages in combat. This nuanced understanding of power dynamics makes him an effective judge of whether battles are worth fighting, whether training will close gaps,
and whether strategic retreats make sense. His mathematical approach to power is very different from Goku's intuitive sensing, both valid, but reflecting their different cognitive styles. The few times Vegeta admits he was wrong about something are seismic events in the series because they occur so rarely. His pride makes admission of error extraordinarily difficult, so when it happens, it carries enormous weight. These admissions usually come after catastrophic failures, moments when the evidence of his mistake is undeniable. The fact that he can eventually admit error rather than doubling down or making excuses shows strength of character that is easy to miss. It would be easier to blame others or circumstances, but Vegeta has developed the capacity to face his failures directly and acknowledge them. This honesty with himself, however painful, is what allows him to learn from mistakes rather than repeat them endlessly. Vegeta's relationship with food and eating is utilitarian rather than pleasurable. He eats to fuel his body for training, not for enjoyment or social connection the way Goku does. Meals are functional requirements, not experiences to savor. This approach to eating reflects his general relationship with physical pleasure. He does not indulge in things that do not serve his goals. This ascetic tendency makes him more disciplined, but also more rigid, less able to enjoy simple pleasures that might make life richer. His focus on purpose over pleasure has made him an incredible warrior, but has cost him access to joys that others take for granted. The dynamics of Vegeta and Bulma's marriage are fascinating for what we see and what we do not. They clearly care for each other deeply, but their relationship is never portrayed as conventionally romantic. There are no grand declarations of love, few, if any, tender moments shown on screen. Yet their partnership works, built on mutual respect and complementary personalities. Bulma provides emotional intelligence and social skills that Vegeta lacks, while Vegeta provides protection and a kind of stability through his unwavering dedication. Their marriage suggests that love can take many forms, that relationships can succeed without fitting traditional romantic narratives. They work precisely because they do not try to change each other, but accept each other's limitations. Vegeta's nightmares, which surely must occur, though rarely shown, would be windows into his deepest fears. Dreams of failing to protect his family, of being weak when strength is needed, of losing to Goku permanently, of becoming the villain he once was. The psychological toll of carrying these fears while maintaining his confident exterior must be substantial. Sleep, which should be rest, becomes another battlefield where he fights his own mind. This internal struggle that no one sees adds depth to his character, suggesting that the confident warrior we observe is maintained through constant effort against doubt and fear that never fully disappear. The concept of inherited trauma applies to Vegeta in interesting ways. He carries trauma from his own experiences, but also inherited trauma from being raised in a militaristic, violent culture that valued only strength. The Saiyan approach to child-rearing, sending babies to conquer planets, viewing attachment as weakness, creating warriors rather than people. This cultural trauma shaped him before his personal traumas occurred. Breaking these patterns with his own children requires him to consciously reject the parenting he received and the cultural values he was raised with. Every gentle moment with Trunks or Bulla is a victory over inherited trauma, a choice to end cycles of violence and emotional deprivation. Vegeta's relationship with the concept of home has transformed completely across the series. Initially, home was planet Vegeta, destroyed before he could truly know it. Then home was nowhere, a nomadic existence serving Frieza. Eventually, home became Earth, specifically Capsule Corporation, not through any single decision, but through gradual accumulation of connections and time. The transformation of Earth from conquered planet to prison to home happened so slowly that Vegeta himself might struggle to identify when the change occurred. This organic development of attachment to place mirrors real experiences of immigrants or refugees who build new homes after losing original ones, a journey from loss to belonging that takes years and cannot be rushed. The way Vegeta views Earthlings, humans without Saiyan blood, evolved from contempt to something approaching respect. Initially, he saw them as weak, barely worth acknowledging. Their power levels were insignificant, their lifespans brief, their concerns trivial. Over time, he began to recognize forms of strength that power levels do not measure. Resilience, compassion, ingenuity, courage in the face of overwhelming odds. Humans like Krillin who continue fighting despite knowing they are outclassed, or Bulma who faces threats without any combat power at all, demonstrate strength that Vegeta was raised to dismiss but has learned to acknowledge. This recognition does not mean he suddenly thinks humans are equal to Saiyans in combat, but he has learned that combat prowess is not the only measure of worth. Vegeta's preferred solution to most problems is to hit them harder, a straightforward approach that serves him well in combat, but less well in other areas of life. When this approach fails, he struggles to adapt, to find alternative solutions that require finesse rather than force. His growth in later series includes developing a larger toolkit of approaches, learning when to negotiate rather than dominate, when to retreat rather than persevere, when to ask for help rather than insist on independence. These alternative approaches do not come naturally to him, requiring conscious effort to override instincts honed over decades. Each time he chooses a nonviolent solution, he is fighting against his own nature and training, making these choices more difficult, but also more meaningful than they would be for someone to whom they came easily. The pressure of living up to his own standards must be exhausting for Vegeta. He holds himself to expectations that are simultaneously too high and oddly specific. He must be the strongest, must never show weakness, must maintain Saiyan pride, must protect his family, must prove his worth repeatedly. These standards create a no-win situation where success is expected and therefore meaningless, while failure is catastrophic. The psychological trap of these self-imposed standards means that nothing he achieves feels sufficient. He climbs mountains of his own making, reaching peaks only to see higher mountains beyond. Learning to ease these standards, to accept good enough rather than demanding perfect, represents ongoing work that he struggles with throughout the series. Vegeta's sense of humor about himself, his ability to laugh at his own expense, is nearly non-existent. He takes himself completely seriously, which makes him a target for comedy from others, but prevents him from diffusing tension through self-deprecation. This inability to laugh at himself stems from deep insecurity masked as confidence. If he acknowledged his own absurdities, he would have to confront the possibility that the persona he has built is somewhat ridiculous. The prince of a dead planet, obsessed with surpassing someone who does not share his obsession, constantly proclaiming superiority while finishing second. The cognitive dissonance required to maintain this self-image would collapse under the weight of self-awareness, so he avoids that awareness entirely. The moments when Vegeta is genuinely at peace are almost impossible to identify in the series. There is always another threat, another training session, another reminder that he is not yet strong enough. The concept of peace, of being satisfied with where he is, seems foreign to his nature. Even in quiet moments with his family, part of his mind is elsewhere, planning training or worrying about future threats. This inability to be fully present in peaceful moments is both his strength and his tragedy. It drives him to continuous improvement, but denies him the ability to enjoy the life he has built. He is always becoming, never being, always reaching for the next level rather than appreciating the current one.
Vegeta's legacy in his own mind versus his legacy as others see it are completely different. He sees himself primarily as a warrior, judged by strength and combat achievements. Others see him as a father, husband, defender of Earth, reformed villain, and yes, also a powerful warrior. His actual impact on the world goes far beyond his personal concerns, but he rarely acknowledges these other dimensions of his legacy. The Vegeta that will be remembered is someone more complex and interesting than the Vegeta he thinks he is. This gap between self-perception and reality suggests a profound lack of self-knowledge, an inability to see himself as others see him, which is both sad and very human. The physical scars that Vegeta must carry, both visible and internal, tell the story of his life in ways that words cannot. Every scar represents a battle, a defeat, a moment when he was not strong enough. His body is a map of failure and survival, of coming back from injuries that would have killed others. These scars are marks of shame and pride simultaneously. Shame that he was hurt, pride that he survived. Unlike Goku, who heals cleanly from most injuries, Vegeta seems to carry more permanent damage, as if his body remembers trauma in ways that Goku's does not. This difference might be physical or might be psychological, his body refusing to fully heal because he cannot let go of the failures that caused the injuries. Vegeta's understanding of sacrifice has deepened considerably from his early days when he sacrificed others without hesitation to achieve his goals. Learning to sacrifice himself for others represents a complete moral inversion. But even more profound is his willingness to sacrifice his own priorities and desires for his family's well-being, sacrificing training time to be present, sacrificing his preference for solitude to participate in family life, sacrificing his pride to ask for help when needed.
These small daily sacrifices are less dramatic than his big heroic ones, but perhaps more meaningful because they are chosen repeatedly rather than made once in a crisis. The way Vegeta experiences joy when he allows himself to feel it at all is through achievement and growth. He feels satisfaction when he masters a new technique, genuine pleasure when he realizes he has become stronger, a fierce joy in battle against worthy opponents. These are not the gentle, peaceful joys of family life or friendship, but the sharp, bright joys of accomplishment and challenge. His capacity for joy is real, but narrow, focused entirely on his warrior identity. Expanding his capacity for joy beyond this narrow band would require him to value other aspects of life more highly, a change that has begun but remains incomplete. As you drift deeper now, let these final images wash over you like gentle waves. See Vegeta standing in the gravity room, sweat and determination marking his features, choosing for the 10,000th time to push beyond his limits. See him watching his daughter play, a soft expression he would never allow others to witness touching his face. See him standing beside Goku, rivals and allies, and something more complex than friendship. Two warriors who have pushed each other to heights neither could reach alone. See him looking at his hands, marked by countless battles, capable of destruction and protection both, and wondering which legacy will define him. Let the complexity of this character carry you into dreams where change is always possible, where yesterday's choices need not determine tomorrow's actions, where pride and humility can coexist, where strength means more than power. Rest now, knowing that the journey of becoming never truly ends, that we are all works in progress, that even princes of destroyed planets can build new kingdoms in the hearts of those they protect.